Hello everyone, and while we're driving, we're going to talk about how Facebook, otherwise known as Meta, rejected buying Bitcoin with their massive treasury full of dollar bills. Now, we're just going to call it Facebook because Meta sounds dumb. They joined the ranks of Microsoft and Amazon in not buying crypto for their reserves. Now, the vote was very disappointing to me. They had about 5 billion votes. About 99.9% of those votes, or shares, voted to not buy any Bitcoin for the reserve. There were like 1.5 million votes or something out of 5 billion votes that actually wanted to buy Bitcoin for the reserve. Mark Zuckerberg actually did bring this vote to cast. I don't really know what his thoughts are about it. He's kind of the younger generation, about my age, so I guess that, my guess is like, he might actually want to buy, but since he's kind of like the chairman, CEO, or whatever, he probably voted with the majority. Otherwise, just his votes alone would be more than 1.5 million. Now, I'm not saying like, his financial future is at risk, because obviously Mark Zuckerberg's financial future is not at risk. He has plenty of money. You don't need to worry about him. But I'm saying that like these investors are not doing what's best for their own interests, because the dollar, we know, does depreciate every year. And if you look at Bitcoin's growth rate, it's obviously fairly high and positive growth rate. So this is the kind of asset you would actually want for some of your reserves. And we're not saying you essentially put all your reserves in Bitcoin. That would be kind of insane. But at least 10% or something of your reserves in Bitcoin. It's not like other big companies like BlackRock aren't putting money in reserves. So you won't be the only one putting money in the reserves. So I definitely think it was kind of dumb for him to actually reject it. I think he should have tried to push for it harder. I don't think he really pushed for it at all. I think he just wanted to bring the vote up to it and let the shareholders decide. And I think a lot of the shareholders were maybe like boomers or something, because they voted in the same way that Amazon and Microsoft did. Maybe the government influenced them, but I doubt that, because the government under Donald Trump has been pretty really supportive of cryptos. So I kind of doubt that as well. I'm not really sure what to think of this and why Zuckerberg and Facebook voted in such a way overwhelmingly to reject Bitcoin, because it doesn't make that much sense to me, honestly. Like, you think a tech company with techie investors would actually jump at the chance to buy Bitcoin. And even if most of the investors are boomers, I would expect there were some high net worth individuals that are of Gen X or millennials that would actually be interested in acquiring some Bitcoin for the reserves, because, it must not be fun to see your money essentially just melt away, just having it with dollar bills, because essentially that's what it is right now, USD. I understand you want some kind of safety, but I don't think just buying Bitcoin is any more risky than realistically buying stock market stocks. Now, I'm not saying altcoins. Altcoins, I acknowledge, are very, very risky. But Bitcoin, I think by itself is really not that risky. And I don't think it's any more risky than buying a combination of S&P 500 stocks. It might still be more risky than buying the index, but not by a large amount. It's been there for 15, 16 years. Yes, it does have a lot of ups and downs. The ups and downs are definitely more than the S&P 500 index for the most part. But, the ups generally win. And if you're investing in a reserve for more than just a couple of years at a time, you would think that the gains easily outweigh the losses, as you can see every 4 year cycle. I mean, even 4 years to the date this time around may not be as glorious, obviously, 64,000 to 112,000, but that's nearly 100%. And for 4 years, that's pretty good gains. And that's been the least 4 years so far. Now, we're not asking you to gamble to buy Fartcoin or anything. We're just asking you to buy Bitcoin. And you had a chance. They had a chance to buy one of the fastest appreciating assets out there. Plus, you've never had a more friendly administration to crypto. I understand it has its pitfalls because, actually removing all the regulations, there's a lot more scams out there, but none of the scams really involve Bitcoin itself most of the scams all involve altcoins and like, junk coins, like meme coins, and not Bitcoin itself. And yes, there is obviously concern about Bitcoin's mining procedures, which I understand if, kind of that's your concern realistically. But I don't know if really the Facebook investors are really thinking about that right now. I think they're just making a very poor investment decision. Maybe because most of them are boomers, they don't want to deal with this new stuff. Maybe they want to retire soon and they want to take the money out. I can understand if your retirement age is within 2 or 3 years. You might think we're going into a bear market, and if we go into a bear market, there might not be enough time for you to wait. That's cool, but I can't believe the majority of investors are like that. I'd have to believe the majority of investors aren't really looking to retire, or, especially if it's the company's treasury, maybe not looking to sell out in the next 2 or 3 years. Maybe if you're looking at a longer term impact, you gotta be positive about buying Bitcoins though. Because I do believe with all, and since BlackRock, Fidelity, all these big investment companies are buying it, they have a strong interest in not seeing it collapse and fall apart. So I think there is a good amount of safety there. And plus, companies like Coinbase are in the S&P 500 index now. So, I think crypto companies are gaining more and more of a say in how this stuff actually works out. And I really believe that it's just very short-sighted for them to not buy any of these Bitcoins. I mean, these are multi-billion-dollar companies, some of the biggest companies in existence, big tech powers. And I'm very, very surprised and disappointed that they all voted in the same way, because there have been other companies, smaller tech companies, that have actually voted to buy crypto with their reserves. And I felt once they opened up to their major investors, the major investors would actually see the merits of buying BTC. And they would actually jump on the opportunity to buy a higher yield thing for their treasury. Now, obviously, like I said, 10% weighted in their treasury wouldn't really be all that bad, because you still have the 90% if you need emergency funds, if you run out of money. And Facebook and Microsoft and Amazon are sitting on giant piles of cash. It seems like the more big the pile of cash they're sitting on, the less likely they want to buy Bitcoin. But why? If you're sitting on a giant pile of cash, that pile of cash is just sitting there and not doing you anything. And you want to buy ROI assets with that big pile of cash, because if you don't, you're just kind of wasting that big pile of cash, and it's just going to depreciate. And the bigger your pile of cash is, the easier it should be to actually make the determination to at least buy some risk and yield-bearing asset with a small amount of that pile of cash. Because if you need money, you still got the rest of the pile of cash. And I'm kind of saying pile of cash in literal terms, because all three of these companies are sitting on fairly large piles of cash, especially Microsoft. But even Facebook, I think they're sitting on double-digit billions or high single-digit billions pile of cash. You can't just let that cash sit there and rot, because that would be neglect on investment. So I don't really know why out of 5 million votes, only 5 billion votes, only 1.6, 1.7 million was yay in favor of buying Bitcoin. I would expect it, even if it gets rejected in the long term, I would have expected it to be a lot closer. But it looks like for these major investors, we're much, much further apart than I would actually like. So maybe Bitcoin's not quite as going close to mainstream as I would like. And I would expect after Wall Street's acknowledgement, some of these investors, especially in the tech companies, would actually open up to buying more Bitcoin for the reserves, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. I wonder how much longer it would take, because there are several companies that are looking at Bitcoin in their reserves. And these are some of the biggest companies in existence. A lot of their business, because of their reserves, is actually built on finances as well. So they gotta see the potential. I mean, it seems like the CEOs are kind of against it, so they kind of will the rest of their investors to vote against it. But they got to have some foresight. And I don't really see why tech companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook would actually vote against holding Bitcoin in the reserves, because it doesn't really conflict with their interests. Well, maybe if you want to make your own stablecoin, maybe, but not even that. But it doesn't conflict with their own interests. I could actually see if JP Morgan, Citibank, or any of those companies would say like we don't want to hold Bitcoin in our reserves, because Bitcoin and crypto obviously does threaten their interest for banks, but for tech companies it really doesn't threaten their interest for banks. It's actually like, it actually goes hand in hand with their strategy, which I find really, really weird that they would actually reject it. And what's weird is like, it's all these banks that are actually like starting to adopt Bitcoin, and they might actually adopt Bitcoin in their treasury and otherwise before these tech companies, which I find very, very ironic. So I don't really know what's wrong with these investors. Let me know if you think you know what's wrong, because I can't believe that all of them are like really, really old and they just don't believe in this market. They are like in a tech already, a market that's like, based on innovation and pushing boundaries. And I know investors are always looking for ROI. Some of them would sacrifice their families for ROI, for God's sake. So I don't see why they would not be able to take a risk on something like Bitcoin, which has a fairly proven track record and already a lot of institutional funds actually backing it. So I feel like this is just kind of weird. And like without a presidential administration pressing on them to not invest in it, it doesn't make any sense at all. So yeah, I just find it kind of weird. I'm kind of disappointed in Facebook, also Amazon and Microsoft, because like some people were like saying, oh, the Biden administration was forcing Microsoft to not buy Bitcoin. Not the case. Not the case at all. The Biden administration no longer exists. It's the Trump administration, and they're still not buying. So it was obviously not the Biden administration that was applying pressure for them not to buy Bitcoin, because they're still not buying it right now under the Trump administration. So let me know what you think, why these guys aren't buying. Like and subscribe, hit that bell notifications button, and I will see you in the next video.